It's time for Football at 4 with 97.3 ESPN.com's Andrew DiCecco.
My first allegiance is what will be best for the Philadelphia Eagles and our fans for the next 3, 4, 5 years.
Powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. Now, live from inside the Matt Black Kia Studios. It's Football at 4.
Josh Heddick filling in for Mike Gill here, Football at 4. Powered by the Inside the Birds podcast, the latest edition with Jeff Mosher, Adam Kaplan, dropped this morning. You can go check it out. A lot's going on this week in the NFL. A lot of moves, a lot of shaking, and how it impacts the Eagles and more right now. As promised, Football at 4 at 5 p.m. with Andrew DiCecco right now on the Boardwalk Kind of Hotline. Football at 4 being brought to you by Dr. Lyle M. Back for everything from skincare to cosmetic surgery. Go to ilovelyle.back.com or call 856-MAKEOVER for Dr. Lyle M. Back, proud sponsor of Football at 4. Andrew, welcome into Football at 4 at 5. How you doing?
I'm doing well, Josh. How about yourself?
I'm doing all right. You know, it's a crazy world we live in. We're just kind of like maneuvering around everything that's going on out there with college basketball. We got to talk Eagles because, Andrew, it's been a very interesting weekend. I want to start with the wide receivers because there's a huge wide receiver class out there. And listen, the draft is going to have 3, if you include Kyle Pitts, 4 top-tier receivers in the draft. And then you look at the receivers who are in free agency, Kenny Golladay, Juju Smith-Schuster. So how do you think that the free agents could impact the draft and vice versa at the wide receiver position?
Well, it's certainly going to impact it. I mean, Juju's incredibly young and has yet to hit his stride of what he can accomplish. I mean, I think that putting him in a different system where he can be a surefire number one, his skill set's really going to shine. And then Kenny Golladay is another player that he's like a piece. It's a team that needs one final piece. You're going to look at a guy like Kenny Golladay because he's a red zone option. He's a little bit older than Juju, but I mean he's an immense talent, and he's gonna command a lot of money on the open market. Neither of those guys are burners, obviously, so they're not going to yield as much on the open market because that's a skill set that tends to garner a lot more of a higher price tag. But I mean it's going to impact the draft a little bit regardless because you have 2 top guys there, and we'll see what happens at the top of the draft.
When you think about those receivers you just mentioned, how do those guys stack up versus the guys in the draft? Because we all know some teams, they might not want to take a risk on a receiver, but they might also say that, for example, a Chase or a Smith or a Waddle might be better than who they can get in free agency, right? Yeah,
also from a cost perspective as well. I mean, the Eagles don't need a possession guy such as a Kenny Golladay or a Juju. What they need is some more speed to add another layer to that offense. And they're going to have a couple of options there at the top of the draft. It's going to have an interesting decision to see whether they go the route of a Jamar Chase, a Waddle, a Devontae Smith, or even possibly a Kyle Pitts. But I think that getting those guys, on a rookie contract versus adding a veteran player who doesn't really fit what the Eagles doesn't really fit a need. They have their possession guys. They got a Travis Fulgham. You have J.J. Arcega-Whiteside. So you're going to see if he's able to develop under the tutelage of Sirianni, Kevin Patullo, and Aaron Moorhead. So, I mean, I would definitely look at wide receiver at number 6 and go that route.
Any interest at all in maybe T.Y. Hilton on a 1-year deal?
I mean, for very little. I don't know how much he's going to command on the open market, but I have to think that he would get a better offer elsewhere. I don't know how much the Eagles are really going to have to offer him. Also, at his stage of his career, he probably wants to go to a contender, I would think. So the Eagles are about to embark on a 3-year rebuild. So I don't know how enticing that's going to be for a veteran free agent such as T.Y.
Andrew DiCecco joining us here on the Boardwalk Kind of Hotline here on the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN. Again, follow him on Twitter at @DiCecco NFL. Of course, we're talking about the Eagles here. Football at 4 at 5 p.m. today because of college basketball here on 97.3 ESPN. Andrew, obviously the salary cap came out this week, $182.5 million. And I mentioned this to Jeff Mosher yesterday. I want to get your thoughts on this. That's still about $16 million less than what it was last year. is there a part of you that thinks if the salary cap was the same as it was last year or more, that maybe certain things would be different? Because not just the Eagles who are having problems. We saw the Chiefs have to cut both of their starting tackles from their Super Bowl win. So you're talking about two of the top tackles in the league going on the free agent market. So it's not just the Eagles. The entire league is having to reshuffle the deck because of this salary cap situation.
Yeah, and this is something that we kind of anticipated last summer with given everything that was kind of materializing, that I just didn't think it was going to be this drastic, Josh. I mean, you're seeing not just the Eagles affected by this, but you mentioned, my gosh, the Chiefs having to part with both their tackles, and it's just all over the NFL. Teams are just having to shed some excess, shed players to, get under and meet a certain, number. And that's unfortunate because, I mean, in an ordinary offseason, this wouldn't be the case. But, I mean, I didn't think it was going to be this drastic. I thought that there would be – I always thought there were going to be a handful of teams that were affected by it. I just didn't think that it was going to be league-wide.
Now, we know the Eagles, they restructured 2 more contracts. Here they have restructured Javon Hargrave. They restructured Isaac Seumalo. Obviously, it's good to see that there are guys who are willing to do the restructures because it does save the team money, and it shows that they want to be here as well. What are your thoughts on it's become a list now. You got Kelsey, you got Slay, you got Seumalo, you got Hargrave. We know that Lane Johnson said he's willing to restructure. We know that Brandon Graham says, I'll do whatever it takes to stay in the Eagles uniform. I'll restructure. What is your thought on the willingness of all these guys to just say, listen, you need to work the contract, you need to work the numbers. I'm game because I want to be here.
Well, I think it speaks to the culture that's kind of been in that locker room for a number of years. I mean, despite the chatter and the stories that have come out about that, I do think that people like being here. Brandon Graham put that very nicely. I believe it was recently, and it's obvious when you see all these guys willing to kind of accommodate the Eagles and restructure, for the greater good of the team. And these guys want to be here. They want to finish what they started. It speaks of their character and their commitment to the football team. And, after seeing everything that's kind of transpired in that regard, I think that answers a lot of questions as far as the toxicity, the rumors of toxicity and that swirling around the NovaCare complex and things like that. I don't think that's necessarily the case.
I don't know if you have an answer for this, and I don't think there really is a right answer to this. But where do you think these rumors come from about the problems and the toxicity and the things that are out there? Because I feel like sometimes stuff starts up on social media and it doesn't really come from anywhere legitimate. It just becomes propagated because enough people say it, retweet it, share it, like it. You know what I mean?
Well, there are, certain factors that would lead people to believe that there would be. I mean, taking a quarterback in the second round like Jalen Hurts is going to cause a little bit of turmoil, be it large or small. If you're Carson Wentz in that situation, there's going to be a little bit of tension there, certainly. And I think that when you look, you're going to look at every little thing that they do. Are they communicating on the sideline? This, that, and the other thing. When they took Hurts out of the game and in the Washington game, they're looking for body language. They're looking for, any little reason to kind of, incite some sort of, rage over certain things. And I think a lot of it is kind of, it's kind of over exaggerated. And unfortunately, everyone in that locker room is looked under a microscope. So they look for any little thing to attach it to. But I don't necessarily think that outside of that Carson Wentz situation, yeah, there were issues, but I don't know that they were as large as, as many, believe that it was. I mean, there's certainly issues there, and he's no longer here, but I don't think there was as much drama swirling around that building as many were led to believe.
Couldn't I argue, just play devil's advocate, that every team has issues except for the team that wins the Super Bowl every year, right? Like every team has something they got to deal with. So I'm trying to understand a little bit better because I feel like sometimes I jump on social media, Andrew, I read an article and I see the reactions under the article or under a post, like over at InsideTheBirds.com or 97.3ESPN.com or on your Twitter or Moshe or Kaplan. And I feel like it's like, I'm just trying to understand where some of this is coming from. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Unfortunately, there's a lot of negativity on social media. That's why I I get in there, I put my article out, and I kind of scoot out these days because, it's just not very productive. And it's not, you're seeing a lot of the same arguments every single day. And I don't know where the hostility is coming from. I mean, the Eagles are in a great position to improve the football team in the draft. There's a lot to look forward to with the new regime. I think everyone just needs to approach the offseason with an open mind. Not everyone's going to share the same viewpoints, but to answer your question, I'm kind of dumbfounded myself. I don't know why it's necessarily such a hostile place, but it is. And hopefully, a good draft and a productive offseason will kind of dissipate that a little bit.
Andrew DiCecco here, Football at 4, powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. Speaking of Adam Kaplan and Jeff Mosher, the latest episode with them dropped this morning at 6 a.m. Andrew, what dropped yesterday was the Q&A podcast, the second episode, and they dove even deeper into the wide receiver situation. And one of the things they brought up was Jalen Reagor. And Jason Devon, who was with the team last year, he said that Reagor has the most dog in him of anybody on the team, that he gets personally offended when people bring up Justin Jefferson. There's a part of him that he thinks that he has the highest ceiling of all the young receivers on the team. I want to get your reaction to that because you were evaluating him all through the draft process before he got drafted. And now Yvonne, who wasn't evaluating him in the draft, but he's saying on the other side of the coin, I was with this guy with the Eagles this past year, and this is what I see from him. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I would certainly hope that he has the highest upside considering he was a first-round pick. But I to a degree, I agree with what Jason said. But when I was evaluating him for the draft, one thing that I didn't particularly, care for was sometimes the body language wasn't great. If things weren't necessarily going his way as far as, he had a really inaccurate quarterback in college, but you need to, at being a leader, you need to lead by example, and it's all about positive body language and making the most of your opportunities. He dropped the football a lot. I look to see how he would respond from that. And, not a lot of times it wasn't always necessarily positive, but, and you talk about having a chip on his shoulder every time Justin Jefferson's brought up. Yeah, I would agree. I think that he should, because he's here and Justin Jefferson's not. This is, he's a Philadelphia Eagle, and people are talking about somebody who's no longer, isn't a member of the franchise. But he needs to control what he can control, go on the field and make plays when the ball's thrown in his direction. He has a long way to go as a route runner. He needs to just become more proficient in the route tree and be more aware when he's running his routes. He tends to squeeze the sideline a little bit. You didn't see Justin Jefferson or rookies do that. So when you make these kind of mistakes, they're always going to harken back in. Justin Jefferson was there, and he was more of a polished product. But he just needs to have that mindset through the offseason that he knows the player that he is. He's comfortable in who he is, and he's going to take that next step. And hopefully that quiets a lot of that chatter, and he doesn't have to hear that anymore.
I made the argument yesterday, Andrew. You tell me what you think of this. I think people with their perspective on Jefferson is a little exaggerated as well, because Jefferson walked into an ideal situation and he had, 124 targets last year. The guy with the most targets on the Eagles last year was 79 with Greg Ward. So
right.
You have a situation where Kirk Cousins outplayed Carson Wentz last year. You had an offense that literally was telling Jefferson, you're basically filling the void of Stephon Diggs when it comes to targets. I don't think Jefferson has that kind of production. I'm not saying he's going to be a bad receiver, but I just look at him when he did with Minnesota, and I look at him and say, I just don't see that guy doing that here with the Eagles last year.
Well, that's fair to say, but he's a volume receiver, Justin Jefferson. He's a more polished route runner. He has great spatial awareness, good body control, can make those tough contested catches. And, coming out, there was no question that he was a more, NFL-ready player. And they're different types of players, because he's a guy that you can force feed the ball to, and he's going to be a chain mover. He can work all three levels of the field, but that's not necessarily his strength. He's not a burner by any means. But, I think if you plugged him in on a lot of offenses, he would have been just as productive, because he knows how to find the soft spots in zone. He has sure hands, and he was really savvy for a rookie, and that really stuck out to me. But I don't know if he would have had quite the prolific rookie season that he had with Minnesota. But, you put him on the Eagles, and he's going to have a markedly better season than Jalen Reagor had.
Another thing they brought up on the Q&A pod, episode 2 on Wednesday morning that dropped was we've talked numerous times about on Football at 4 about Travis Fulgham. Burst onto the scene, has a great few games, and then it just kind of like got phased out. And Jason Avant came out and said the Eagles, we as an organization, was the quote, stunted Travis's growth with indecision. And that's from a guy who was in the building. So I want to get your reaction to that. Avant saying that the Eagles stunted Travis's growth last year.
That's another thing that was apparent because it was the oddest thing. You don't just put together those 4 games of that high level of play and just kind of disappear, and you all of a sudden you're a non-factor and you suddenly can't play anymore. You can't see the field. I think the return of Alshon Jeffrey certainly impacted that, and I think that bringing in when Jalen Hurts took over, he didn't quite have the same rapport with Travis that Carson Wentz had. I think that also played a part in that, but I think they really wanted to get Alshon into the offense, and unfortunately it took a lot of snaps away from Travis. Of course, you also saw those practice habits of Travis Fulgham that were questioned or late in the season. You started to hear some of those rumors. That could have played into it a little bit, I suppose, but I think it just had more so to do with the Eagles not really prioritizing getting a younger player on the field and getting him, maximizing his reps and opportunities, and really going back to, the wily old veteran and trying to make it work when it obviously wasn't working. And, he wasn't going to be here for the long haul.
Speaking of wide receivers, you wrote over at InsideTheBirds.com. You were answering a mailbag on different questions about the draft. And you have on the site, you have Waddle over Smith of the Alabama receivers. Your full list of ranking them was Pitts, Chase, Waddle, Smith. I want to focus on specifically Waddle and Smith. I'm glad you brought this up because one of the things you talk about is the frame of these guys, how they're built. And that's my biggest concern with Devonta Smith. When I heard he was not willing to weigh in at the Senior Bowl, that concerned me. And I wasn't the only one who was concerned. And people keep saying, oh, well, he's like Marvin Harrison. Let me tell you something. Marvin Harrison was 181 pounds before he was drafted. You're talking about a guy in Smith who they listed him at 175, but we all know in football terms, they make you weigh a little bit more, and they make you a little bit taller. So I'm pretty sure that Smith is probably a little smaller than he's listed.
Yeah, and, going back to Marvin Harrison is one of the greatest receivers to ever play the game. But when he faced corners that were physical and tough, like a Ty Law in those championship games, well, he was sort of a non-factor. You eventually have to be able to go against these tougher physical corners. And when I look at someone with the build of a Devonta Smith, it's tough to kind of figure how he can be an every down player or play a full slate of games in the NFL with that type of frame. Yeah, he made a living in college. He was known as being a tough receiver who's willing to go across the middle and make these tough catches and not afraid of contact. That's fine, but when you're looking at the pro level, there's a lot more that goes into it. You're not just going to be able to run free, through a secondary. And I mean, you're going to face some challenges. You're going to face a lot of physical defensive backs, and you're not just going to have, that free reign to do whatever you want out there in the open field. So when I look at him and Waddle has a much better frame to be a receiver that's going to be a starter and they can hold up for kind of withstand the rigors of a full season. And he's also way more explosive. So I think if you look at what he can bring to the table, pair him with Jalen Reagor, all of a sudden the Eagles have a pretty dynamic offense.
What is also special about Waddle to you in terms of receiver? Because I didn't see him much last year because of the injury. So you're kind of going off of a little bit of last year, but also more of the year before, where he was playing alongside Judy and Ruggs. So what do you see in Waddle's game that makes you think he could be so good in the NFL?
The suddenness in his route running, the ability to stretch teams vertically, affect all 3 levels of the field. He's not a limited player by any means. He's a home run guy. And I just think that when you look at what the Eagles offense needs, they need speed and they need a player who can be not just a guy who can, a role player. They need somebody that can be out there and be a starter, be an impact player. I don't know if Devonta Smith can be that in the NFL. I'm not saying he can't, but in my opinion right now, when you're looking at the 2 players side by side, if you're the Eagles, I think you have to go Jalen Waddle for that very reason, because looking at his skill set, looking at his build, I think that he's really what the Eagles need right now.
The full Eagles draft Q&A is up at InsideTheBirds.com. He is Andrew DiCecco. You can follow him on Twitter at @DiCeccoNFL. Of course, he covers the Eagles as well as the NFL draft, and he joins us each week here on Football at 4. He'll be back on Tuesday here on the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN at the usual 4 o'clock time. Football at 4 will be back at 4 o'clock next week. But we appreciate you, Andrew, jumping on at a different time on the Boardwalk kind of hotline.
Not a problem, Josh. Have a great weekend.
Of course, Football at 4 being brought to you by Dr. Lyle M. Back for everything from skincare to cosmetic surgery. Go to iloveLyleBack.com. Call 856-MAKEOVER for Dr. Lyle M. Back, proud sponsor of Football at 4.